This emergence into consciousness was triggered by our ancestors' encounters with visionary plants and the beginning of shamanism. If you analyze the cave art, so many details that make it clear that this was an art of altered states of consciousness, of visions. That plants like the Amanita muscaria mushroom or psilocybin mushrooms appear to have been directly connected with this sudden and radical change. So to investigate this possibility, when I got interested in this mystery, I went down to the Amazon, where there are still surviving shamanistic cultures today, and where they drink the powerful visionary brew ayahuasca, of which the active ingredient is dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which is actually closely related at the molecular level to psilocybin. Now, normally, DMT cannot be activated orally. When we encounter it in the West, it's generally smoked. There's an enzyme in our stomachs called monoamine oxidase, which switches off DMT on contact. But in the Amazon, they've got round this problem, and they say it was the spirits that taught them how to do it. The DMT in the ayahuasca brew is contained in these leaves from a plant that they call chacruna in the Amazon. And there they mix it together with this vine. And out of the 150,000 different species of plants and trees in the Amazon, this is the one that contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which switches off that enzyme in our stomachs and allows the DMT in the leaves, when the two are married together and cooked in water, to be absorbed orally, and takes us on a 4-hour journey into extraordinary realms.
As Alan Watts used to say, your body does not end at your fingertips. And one of the things that happens with psychedelics is that when you touch something, the boundary basically dissolves, and that you and the thing touched are together. See, I find the word non-dual a little bit like an on-off switch. And it's really the level of non-duality, which is really the level of connectedness, which is, at this point, there's a wonderful term in Buddhism to describe this. It's called a skin bag full of dirt. So that's a very unconnected kind of image. But as you go out, are you connected to the people you care about, to people, to living things, to what we call non-living things, which have just as much energy around every atom as every living thing, and so forth, until your sense of identification and what you are touching simply shift. And that shift, meaning the ability to blend, is a remarkable one. Now, there's also what's called a kinesthetic sense, which is, where are you in time and space? Psychedelics have a peculiar property, which we used to think was that it kind of exploded parts of the brain into high action, and that's why you had intense visual, intense everything, and then you also had a going beyond personal identity. And that made great sense to all of us, because the world couldn't be that vivid and that exciting all the time. And then we actually did some research. For 40 years, we just did guesswork because we weren't allowed to do research. And the research is with psilocybin, and some very eager people in England were willing to take an injection of psilocybin and have their brain scanned, and then have the rest of the 4.5 hours to do what they wanted. And what the brain scan showed was that cerebral blood flow, instead of going high and heavy into those areas we imagined it would, the sensory areas and so forth, is that cerebral blood flow was diminished in the parts of the brain most concerned with personal identity. So it looks like that every spiritual system was right. That if you get out of the way, the universe is much more happy to see you. And so the fundamental is that personal identity is indeed this magnificent filtering system to prevent you being too excited with reality. And what I'm saying is, if I were going to be doing any kind of science in any perceptual area with any sense, I would want to have, as in my toolkit, different psychedelics. Because if I'm really interested in perception, then I want to have tools which I can move perception around.
And on the problem of how we should live our lives to prepare for what we will confront after death. And the ancient Egyptians expressed their ideas in transcendent art, which still touches us emotionally today. And they came to certain very specific conclusions that the soul does survive death and that we will be held accountable for every thought, every action, every deed that we have lived through in our lives. So we better take this precious opportunity to be born in a human body seriously and make the most of it. And in these inquiries into the mystery of death, the ancient Egyptians weren't just exercising their imaginations. They highly valued dream states. And it's now known that they used visionary plants like the hallucinogenic blue water lily. And it's interesting that the ancient Egyptian tree of life has recently been identified as the Acacia nilotica, which contains high quantities of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, the same active ingredient that we find in ayahuasca. Now, it's difficult to imagine a society more different from the society of ancient Egypt than our society today. We hate visionary states in this society. I believe we are a species with amnesia. I think we have forgotten our roots and our origins. I think we are quite lost in many ways, and we live in a society that invests huge amounts of money and vast quantities of energy in ensuring that we all stay lost. A society that invests in creating unconsciousness, which invests in keeping people asleep so that we're just passive consumers or producers and not really asking any of the questions. And I found for me the study of the past and the mysteries of the past has been a liberating process. The ancient texts from many different cultures say that it's an incredible privilege to be born in a precious human body and to live on this beautiful gem, this garden, this delight of a planet. What a gift we were all given when we were given the opportunity to incarnate here, now, on this planet, at this time. We live at a crossroads. There's no doubt. We all feel it. We all know it. There's something coming down the track. And we have to figure out how we're going to respond to that, how we're going to turn it into an opportunity for growth rather than an opportunity for destruction. I don't think it's the first time that mankind has stood at such a crossroads, but here we are now facing it and hopefully dealing with it. A precious opportunity which should not be wasted. When I've asked shamans about the sickness of the West, they say it's quite simple. You guys have severed your connection with spirit. Unless you reconnect with spirit and do so soon, you're going to bring the whole house of cards down around your heads and ours. And rightly or wrongly, they believe that ayahuasca is the remedy for that sickness. And many now are being called to the Amazon to drink ayahuasca, and ayahuasca shamans are traveling throughout the West, offering the brew, often under the radar, often at personal risk, to bring about consciousness change. And it's true that the message of ayahuasca, the universal message, is about the sacred, magical, enchanted, infinitely precious nature of life on earth and the interdependence of material and spiritual realms. And it's impossible to work with ayahuasca for long without being deeply and profoundly affected by this message. And let's not forget that ayahuasca is not alone, that it's part of an ancient worldwide system of the targeted, careful, responsible alteration of consciousness.